My name is Victoria Bennett. I was 33 years old when I discovered that someone in my own family had quietly turned my identity into a financial crime scene. I worked as a commercial insurance fraud investigator in Minneapolis, which meant I spent my days finding altered documents, tracing suspicious payments, and catching people who believed a convincing lie was the same thing as the truth. I thought that made me difficult to deceive. I was wrong. The first warning came at 6:17 on a Thursday evening, less than an hour after I had closed a 6-month investigation involving a staged warehouse fire. An unknown number called twice. Before I could return it, an email appeared notifying me that my contact information had been changed on an account I did not recognize. Then my doorbell camera showed a courier sliding a certified envelope beneath my front gate. Inside was a demand for immediate payment on delinquent loans and credit lines, totaling $80,436. My full name was printed at the top. So was my Social Security number's final 4 digits. The address listed beneath them was not mine, but I recognized it immediately. It belonged to someone I had trusted with a spare key, emergency access to my records, and almost every private detail of my life. The transaction history made my stomach turn. Luxury electronics, sports betting deposits, cash advances, and payments to a digital investment platform. I had never purchased any of them, but I knew exactly who had. That was when the unknown caller left a voicemail saying there were additional accounts I had not yet discovered. I believed I was looking at an expensive clerical error. By midnight, I understood it was deliberate. By the following morning, my parents were already asking me to keep the police out of it. Before I tell you what my brother admitted, and what happened when I refused to protect him, tell me what time it is where you are, and where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. I did not call the number printed in the letter. As a fraud investigator, I knew panic made people careless, so I found the lender's official fraud department independently, verified the number, activated the recorder on my work phone, and documented every step. The representative confirmed that the first account had been opened 11 months earlier. 2 personal credit lines and a retail financing account followed. Whoever applied had supplied my date of birth, previous addresses, employer history, mother's maiden name, and a photograph of my driver's license. My real email and phone number had been replaced within 24 hours of approval. The recovery number ended in 4 digits I recognized immediately. It belonged to my 29-year-old brother, Ethan Bennett. I did not accuse him yet. I asked the representative to preserve the applications, device identifiers, login history, uploaded documents, telephone recordings, and IP records. Then I contacted every other creditor and repeated the process. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. The applications had been submitted from locations near Ethan's apartment and our parents' home. One customer service recording captured a man answering questions about my childhood. He knew the name of my first dog, the street where we grew up, and the hospital where I was born. He even copied the professional tone I used at work. The imitation was imperfect, but it had been enough. 2 years earlier, after our father underwent emergency heart surgery, I had created an encrypted family folder containing identification scans, insurance details, medical directives, and emergency contacts. Ethan had access because our parents trusted him to help whenever I traveled. At the time, he hugged me and said he was glad I finally considered him dependable. Now I realized I had handed him everything required to impersonate me. Old memories began rearranging themselves into evidence. Ethan had asked which bank I used because he supposedly wanted advice about building credit. He once borrowed my laptop and returned it with the browser history erased. Months earlier, my mother had casually asked which phone company our family used when I was younger because Ethan claimed he needed the information for an application. I had answered without suspicion. Every innocent conversation now looked like a lock he had tested before choosing the right key. At 9:42 that night, My mother, Elaine Bennett, called. She did not ask whether I was safe. She said, "Your brother told us there has been a misunderstanding." I asked what he had admitted. She said he had borrowed access because he believed an investment would repay everything before I noticed. My father, Robert Bennett, took the phone and told me Ethan had been under enormous pressure. He said criminal charges would destroy Ethan's future and that a good sister would let the family solve the problem privately. I stared at my credit report. It contained missed payments, unauthorized inquiries, and addresses where I had never lived. I asked how long they had known. My father replied too quickly, "We only found out tonight." That became the first statement from my parents I marked as potentially false. They wanted me to see Ethan as a frightened brother who had made one impulsive mistake. The records showed planning, concealment, and escalation. He had used my identity for almost a year, redirected statements, made minimum payments to delay detection, and opened new accounts whenever the old limits ran out. When his digital investment failed, he moved to online gambling. When those losses grew, he took cash advances to chase them. This was not borrowing. It was a controlled collapse constructed beneath my name. By the next afternoon, I had frozen my credit, filed identity theft affidavits, changed every password, reviewed access logs, and notified my employer's compliance officer. My position required financial integrity, and unresolved fraud-related debt could threaten my access to sensitive investigations. Ethan had not merely damaged my credit, he had placed my career under suspicion. One lender sent me a copy of an application containing my forged electronic signature and a photograph of my driver's license. When I enlarged the image, I noticed a reflection along the bottom edge. The license had been photographed on the black granite counter in my parents' kitchen. That image created a terrifying question. Had my parents seen him? Had they asked what he was doing? Or had they chosen not to know? A stranger could steal my information and take my money. Only family could steal my history, use my memories as security answers, and then demand that I call the violation forgiveness. That night, I created a file named Bennett Family Identity Theft. Before confronting Ethan, I intended to learn exactly what he had done and who had helped him hide it. For 2 days, I barely slept. I moved between my dining table and home office, building a timeline from creditor records, login histories, text messages, archived emails, and family calendar entries. The investigator in me remained methodical. She numbered exhibits, verified dates, and separated facts from assumptions. The sister in me searched desperately for an explanation that would make the betrayal less final. Ethan and I had once been close. When he left technical school, I paid 3 months of his rent. When his car was repossessed, I drove across the city at midnight to bring him home. When our parents compared him to me, I defended him. I had mistaken rescuing him for loving him. Each rescue had taught him that my stability was a family resource he could use without permission. A creditor later provided the recovery email connected to the largest loan. A password reset notification had been forwarded months earlier to an address used by our mother. It did not prove she had participated in the fraud, but it proved the scheme had reached her long before she claimed to know anything. I printed the record and placed it in a folder labeled Parental Knowledge. My hands trembled as I wrote those words. Before leaving to confront Ethan, I opened the wooden box where I kept family keepsakes. Inside was a brass compass he had given me after my first major promotion. The engraving read, "For the one who always gets us home." I had treasured it because I believed he understood what my support meant. As I lifted it, the box slipped. The compass struck the floor, cracking the glass over its face. I stared at the broken needle for several seconds, then left it where it had fallen. I prepared for the confrontation as though I were entering a hostile interview. I emailed the evidence archive to my attorney and closest friend, Marissa Cole. I enabled automatic cloud backup, shared my location with her, and told her to call the police if I failed to check in within 45 minutes. I carried copies rather than originals. I also decided what I needed from Ethan: a truthful explanation, the location of every account, and a signed acknowledgement that he had acted without my permission. Part of me still believed that if he confessed and accepted responsibility, I might support a structured repayment agreement instead of seeking the harshest possible punishment. That possibility disappeared before I entered his apartment. The building was an expensive converted warehouse near the river, despite Ethan's repeated claims that he could barely pay rent. A new motorcycle stood beside the mailboxes. One of the fraudulent statements showed a payment to the same dealership. When Ethan opened the door, his gaze moved from my face to the folder beneath my arm and then to my phone. He smiled as though we were sharing an embarrassing family misunderstanding. "Mom said you were overreacting," he told me. That sentence settled something inside me. He had not prepared to confess. He had prepared a defense. Inside, I saw an expensive gaming computer, unopened electronics, and a whiteboard covered with sports betting calculations. He had spent months converting my future into objects he could touch. I placed the folder on his table and asked, "How many accounts are there?" He leaned against the counter. "That depends on what you count as an account. Count everything opened, accessed, financed, or guaranteed using my identity." His smile disappeared. "You came here to interrogate me." "No," I said. "I came to give my brother one chance to tell the truth before I let the evidence speak for him." Ethan stared at the folder, then laughed. "You always do this. You turn everything into a case so you can be the smartest person in the room." I repeated my question. Instead of answering, he opened a beer and said the debt was not really $80,000, because some items could still be returned. He spoke as though fraud became harmless when the stolen merchandise had receipts. I placed the applications in front of him. "You used my social security number, license, employment history, and voice. You redirected the statements and made minimum payments to keep the accounts hidden. Which part of that was temporary?" His jaw tightened. "I was going to make money. The crypto group had a system. Then the market dropped, and I needed more cash to recover." "You lost the first loan, so you opened others." "I was trying to repair the damage." "You deposited thousands into betting platforms." "That was separate. It was funded by cash advances in my name." He slammed the bottle down. "You have money, a house, and a career. I needed one chance, and you had more credit than you would ever use." There it was. Not desperation, but entitlement. Ethan believed my unused credit belonged to him because I had built more stability than he had. I asked why he had not requested help. His expression filled with years of resentment. "So you could lecture me? So you could decide whether I deserved it?" I was tired of asking permission from the person Mom and Dad hold up as the family success story. I reminded him that I had paid his rent, covered his health insurance, and introduced him to employers. He dismissed it. "Exactly. You like being the person who saves me because it keeps me beneath you." I had never publicized anything I gave him, but resentment did not require truth. He said every compliment our parents gave me felt like an accusation against him. Instead of building a life he respected, he had decided to damage mine until the distance between us became smaller. He admitted the first loan had been partly an experiment. He wanted to see whether my information would work. When the application was approved, he convinced himself he would double the money and repay it. After losing most of it, he became angry at me because my strong credit allowed him to continue. "Your name kept opening doors," he said. "What was I supposed to do? Walk away?" "Yes," I replied. "That is exactly what you were supposed to do." His voice softened, and tears suddenly appeared. He reminded me of the night I brought him home after his car was repossessed, and the time I held his hand in the hospital when he was 12. "You're my big sister," he whispered. "You don't call the police on your own blood." For a moment, the words reached the sister I had been before the letter arrived. Then I noticed his phone lying screen down on a shelf. A faint red reflection pulsed beneath it. Ethan was recording us. I did not reveal that I had noticed. I asked why a lender had a recording of someone impersonating me. He hesitated, then raised his voice. Maybe you authorized the accounts and forgot. You've been stressed. Maybe you regret helping me and now want to blame me. He was not recording a confession. He was manufacturing uncertainty. I crossed the room and turned the phone over. The timer had been running for 19 minutes. Ethan lunged, but I picked it up first. He grabbed my forearm and squeezed. Give me my phone. Let go. You entered my home and stole my property. You recorded me to rewrite what happened. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, he snapped. I'm part of this conversation. And now the recording contains your admissions. His expression changed when he realized his own trap had preserved the truth. He grabbed my other wrist and tried to force my hand open. I pulled away, knocking the bottle to the floor. Glass shattered between us. Ethan followed me toward the door and ordered me to delete the recording. I activated the emergency shortcut on my phone. When the dispatcher answered, I clearly stated my location and said my brother had admitted to identity theft, physically restrained me, and attempted to seize my phone. Ethan stepped back immediately, his face becoming frighteningly calm. Leave before you ruin everything, he said. I looked at the marks forming around my wrist. I didn't ruin this. 2 officers arrived in the lobby. Ethan tried to speak first, describing me as an emotional sister who had entered his home over a private debt. I showed them the bruises, creditor documents, disputed applications, and the cloud-backed recording. When an officer asked whether he opened the accounts, Ethan said I had known he was using my information. He could not produce written permission or explain why he redirected every statement. My parents arrived before the officers finished taking statements. My mother rushed toward Ethan as though he were the victim. My father demanded to know why I had turned a private problem into a police matter. Neither asked about my wrists. When I said Ethan had grabbed me, my mother answered, "He was scared. You cornered him." She had already decided that his fear excused his violence while my fear made me cruel. My father said there was still time to call the incident a misunderstanding. He promised they would refinance their home and create a repayment plan. Ethan watched them offer their security to protect him from a crime committed against me, and relief spread across his face. He had expected them to rescue him. I asked my mother when she first learned about the accounts. She claimed it was that night. I showed her the password reset message forwarded months earlier. Her face went pale, but she said Ethan told her he was managing an account for me. When I asked why she never checked with me, my father accused me of interrogating my mother. The police separated us. I filed a complete report and transferred the documents to the Financial Crimes Unit. Ethan was not arrested that evening because investigators needed records and subpoenas. My parents treated the delay as proof that the case was insignificant. For the next week, they alternated between begging and blaming. My mother said prison would destroy Ethan. My father said our family would never recover if I continued. Neither acknowledged that Ethan had already destroyed the trust holding us together. The recording later revealed one sentence more important than I realized. Mom already knows enough to back me up. Where does forgiveness end and self-protection begin? For me, the line appeared when my family asked me to sacrifice the truth so Ethan could escape the consequences of choosing to harm me. The investigation lasted 10 weeks. Records connected Ethan's apartment Wi-Fi, phone, and laptop to 11 fraudulent applications, 7 of which had been approved. The balance, including interest and fees, reached $80,436. Investigators also discovered that he had attempted to use forged documents to obtain financing against my home. The application had failed during verification, but it proved he was not preparing to stop. He had been preparing to place my house at risk. 2 verification letters had been sent to my parents' home. My mother had signed for one of them. She claimed she believed it belonged to me and gave it to Ethan because he said he was collecting my mail while I traveled. Employment records showed I was in Minneapolis all week. My father eventually admitted Ethan had confessed months earlier to using Victoria's credit, though he insisted he believed the amount was small. Instead of telling me, my parents gave Ethan $4,000 and instructed him to close the account. He used part of their money for minimum payments, concealing the fraud longer, then gambled the rest. The county attorney charged Ethan with identity theft, financial transaction fraud, forgery, and attempted theft involving my property records. When the arraignment and bond hearing arrived, I knew my parents planned to support him. My father had already messaged me saying they would tell the judge I authorized Ethan to use my information and later changed my mind. He called the lie, providing context. Marissa sat beside me as legal support. Ethan entered wearing a navy suit our father had bought him. His attorney described him as a nonviolent first-time offender with stable housing and parents willing to supervise him. He argued that the accounts resulted from an informal financial arrangement between siblings. The prosecutor responded with forged signatures, device records, diverted statements, the attempted financing against my house, and Ethan's recorded admissions. She also explained that Ethan had contacted me indirectly through our mother after investigators warned him not to interfere with a witness. My parents submitted statements supporting his release. My father said Ethan had made mistakes but was not dangerous. He described me as financially secure and capable of recovering, as though my competence reduced the severity of the crime. He suggested I might have given Ethan informal permission. The judge asked, "Did your daughter ever tell you that she authorized these accounts?" "Not directly," my father admitted. "Then what is the basis for your statement?" Ethan told us there was an understanding. So the defendant's explanation after the fraud was discovered. My father lowered his eyes. "Yes, Your Honor." My mother approached next. Her statement claimed Ethan had struggled because I was more successful, and that I sometimes used my achievements to control the family. She said he had acted out of desperation and never intended permanent harm. Sending him to jail, she argued, would punish everyone. The judge lifted a copy of the letter my mother had signed for. "This was delivered to your residence on October 14th? "Yes." "You said your son told you he was collecting mail for your daughter while she traveled. Was your daughter away that week?" "I believed she was." The prosecutor produced records proving I had entered my office each weekday. The judge asked whether my mother contacted me after a lender sent financial documents to her home. She said no. The judge asked why she transferred $4,000 to Ethan 2 weeks later. "We were helping him," she answered. "With what?" "Debt." "What debt?" I didn't know the details. The judge studied another document and asked the question that changed everything. "Mrs. Bennett, if you believed your daughter authorized these accounts, why did you send your son a text instructing him to keep Victoria from seeing the bank letters until everything is paid down?" My mother started shaking. The message had been recovered from Ethan's phone. I had never seen it. My mother gripped the rail and looked toward my father, but he stared at the floor. The judge repeated the question. "Why hide the letters from an account holder who supposedly gave permission?" "I wanted to prevent a family fight," my mother whispered. "No," the judge replied. "You wanted to prevent discovery." Ethan's attorney objected, but the judge explained that she was determining whether my parents were credible supervisors. My mother admitted Ethan had confessed about one account 7 months before I discovered the debt. She said he promised to repay it and she feared exposing him would push him into a crisis. The judge asked whether she understood that hiding the notices had allowed him to open more accounts. "I thought I was protecting my son," my mother said. The judge looked directly at her. "You have 2 children." The courtroom went silent. My father argued that they feared I would involve the police. The judge pointed out the contradiction. "You feared she would report a crime, so you concealed it. That does not make her reaction excessive. It establishes that you knew the conduct was wrong." The prosecutor then played Ethan's apartment recording. His voice filled the room. "Mom already knows enough to back me up." Another section captured him saying my name kept opening doors. The final clip contained breaking glass, my demand that he release me, and his order to delete the recording. Ethan's courtroom composure collapsed. My mother covered her mouth. My father did not look at me. The judge rejected my parents as supervisors, imposed a strict no-contact order, restricted Ethan's access to financial accounts and electronic devices, and ordered electronic monitoring. Because my parents had concealed evidence and facilitated indirect contact, their home was deemed unsuitable. Ethan was taken into custody until secured release could be arranged. As the deputy approached, he turned to them and said, "You promised you could fix this." It was not an apology. It was anger that they had failed to rescue him. The case continued for months. Ethan initially pleaded not guilty, but forensic analysts recovered draft emails copying my writing style, photographs of my identification, and a spreadsheet titled VB Limits. It listed creditor limits, billing cycles, available balances, and detection risks. One column was labeled Parents Cover. Beside 2 accounts he had written, Mom Gets Mail. Facing overwhelming evidence, Ethan accepted a plea agreement. At sentencing, I explained how the fraud had endangered my career, damaged my credit, threatened my home, and forced me to hear my parents argue that my success made me an acceptable victim. Ethan apologized, but his statement focused mostly on losing his job, apartment, and reputation. The judge interrupted and asked him to identify what I had lost. After struggling, he said money and trust. "I lost my family as I understood it," I said quietly. The judge imposed a stayed prison sentence conditioned on 5 years of supervised probation, restitution, gambling treatment, financial crime counseling, and complete disclosure of all accounts. Ethan had to sell the motorcycle, gaming equipment, and electronics purchased during the scheme. He was prohibited from contacting me directly or indirectly for 5 years, unless I initiated communication through an attorney. Any new fraud or violation could activate the prison sentence. His employer had already fired him for using company equipment during the scheme. His landlord refused to renew his lease, and several friends cut contact after learning their gifts had been purchased with stolen credit. My parents left the courthouse without me. My mother tried to approach, but Marissa reminded her that she could not carry messages from Ethan. My father looked at me as though I had destroyed something permanent. Perhaps I had destroyed the lie that hiding a crime was the same as protecting a family. That was the consequence none of them expected. The sentence stopped Ethan from opening new accounts in my name, but it did not erase the damage. Restoring my financial identity became another job. I disputed every account, submitted police records, reviewed creditor responses, filed complaints, and documented every call. Some lenders removed the balances quickly. Others treated the fraud as less serious because the offender was my brother. One representative suggested arranging repayment privately. I told her a crime does not become a family loan because the offender and victim share parents. My employer conducted an integrity review. I was cleared, but I had to expose the most painful details of my life to supervisors and compliance officers. For several weeks, I was removed from sensitive cases. No one openly accused me, yet every closed-door meeting felt like another punishment Ethan had assigned to me. When I returned to full duty, I noticed that I trusted verbal assurances less and became angry whenever someone described financial fraud as victimless. Ethan tried to bypass the no-contact order almost immediately. A package arrived containing the brass compass, now repaired. I had never told him it was broken. My mother must have taken it from my house before I changed the locks. A note read, "You always brought us home before." It sounded sentimental, but I understood the request. He wanted me to return to the role that protected him from consequences. I turned the package over to his probation officer. Messages then arrived through relatives. An aunt said Ethan was attending treatment and deserved encouragement. A cousin asked whether 5 years of separation was excessive. I replied once. The restrictions were imposed by the court because of Ethan's actions, not by my desire for revenge. After that, I stopped explaining myself. 3 months later, the probation officer informed me that Ethan had tried to obtain an online loan using a former roommate's identity. The application was blocked before any money was released. Ethan claimed an old browser profile had automatically filled the information, but the digital evidence suggested otherwise. The incident showed that his courtroom apology had been a survival tactic rather than a transformation. I cooperated with the investigation and requested an end to all indirect family contact. My parents blamed me again. My father said Ethan could never recover if everyone expected him to fail. I told him accountability was not an expectation of failure, it was a response to behavior. My mother said she had lost her son. I answered, "You chose to lose your daughter while protecting him." Then I ended the call. That evening, I sat alone in my house. There was no celebration and no satisfying sense that justice had restored what was taken. I had preserved my career and stopped the fraud, but victory carried a quiet cost. Childhood memories now contained missing pieces. Family holidays felt edited. Every act of support I had given Ethan raised the question of whether he loved me or simply studied what I would tolerate. Healing began only when I accepted that no explanation would make his betrayal reasonable. I changed the locks, replaced my identification, separated every remaining family account, chose new emergency contacts, and removed my parents from access to my financial and medical information. None of those actions felt cruel. They felt overdue. Nearly a year after the letter arrived, I agreed to meet my parents in a conference room at Marissa's office. I chose neutral ground because I no longer trusted emotional conversations without clear limits. Ethan was not invited, and my parents were warned that carrying messages from him would end the meeting. My mother looked older. My father looked angry that their sadness had not automatically brought me back. They spoke about the family events I had missed, the cost of Ethan's probation, and the difficulty of helping him find approved housing. Their language still placed him at the center. Finally, my father said, "We made mistakes, but we were trying to keep the family together." "Which family?" I asked. He frowned. "The family where Ethan was allowed to use my identity? The family where Mom hid bank letters? The family where you both suggested I authorized a crime against myself? Keeping everyone in the same room is not the same as keeping a family together." My mother started crying. In the past, her tears would have made me soften my words and comfort her. This time, I waited. Eventually, she admitted that Ethan had shown her the first account months before I discovered the fraud. He promised to repay it quickly. She remained silent because she feared I would cut him off. When more letters arrived, she became afraid that telling the truth would expose her earlier decision. Each lie required another lie. By the time I discovered everything, protecting Ethan also meant protecting herself from accountability. It was the first honest explanation she had given me. Honesty did not undo the harm, but it allowed us to discuss the real betrayal rather than a fictional misunderstanding. My father remained defensive. He said parents naturally protect the child who struggles most. I told him protection should help a struggling child face reality, not provide another victim to absorb the consequences. By rescuing Ethan from every failure, they had allowed irresponsibility to become criminal entitlement. I gave them 3 boundaries. Contact with me would remain limited and scheduled. They would never share information about my finances, house, work schedule, travel, or documents with Ethan. They would not carry gifts, messages, apologies, or requests from him. One violation would end contact indefinitely. My father called the rules harsh. My mother said she understood. I told them understanding would be measured by behavior, not promises. I did not forgive Ethan. Forgiveness is often presented as a door victims must open so everyone else can feel comfortable again. I rejected that idea. I could release my daily anger without restoring his access to me. I could hope he changed without volunteering to test whether the change was real. I could remember the brother I once loved without ignoring the man who forged my name. Over the following months, my life grew quieter. My credit recovered, the attempted financing against my house was removed, and my employer promoted me to lead a regional fraud response team. The experience had shown me how shame and family pressure prevent victims from reporting financial abuse. I helped develop training for investigators handling identity theft committed by relatives. The central lesson was simple. Victims may hesitate not because the evidence is weak, but because reporting the crime threatens every relationship around them. I also began speaking privately with financial abuse support groups. I never used Ethan's name. The goal was not to keep punishing him. It was to help others understand that access is not authorization. A sibling, parent, spouse, or adult child does not own your identity because they know your personal information. Shared history is not consent, and family loyalty does not require a victim to finance another person's deception. Ethan eventually violated probation through the attempted loan involving his former roommate. The court imposed custody time, extended his supervision, and tightened his technology restrictions. My parents did not ask me to intervene. Whether they had finally understood or simply knew I would refuse, I could not tell. I received the notification, closed the message, and returned to work. The greatest lesson was not that revenge felt good. Revenge fades quickly when the offender is someone whose childhood fears you knew and whose future you once tried to protect. The deeper lesson was that consequences can be an act of truth. Reporting Ethan did not destroy our family. It revealed the damage secrecy had concealed. My parents' loyalty could not make him innocent, and my love for him did not make me responsible for saving him. Blood is not permission to violate trust. Real family requires honesty, respect, and accountability, not endless sacrifice from the person who causes the least trouble. Protecting yourself is not selfish when someone has turned your compassion into a resource they can exploit. Healing does not require forgetting what happened or pretending the old relationship can be restored. Sometimes healing means accepting that the relationship only seemed safe because you had not discovered the truth. I still keep the brass compass, but I removed the replacement glass, Ethan added. The cracked face reminds me that I spent years believing my purpose was to guide everyone else home. Now I understand that I am allowed to choose my own direction, even when the people I love refuse to follow. What would you do if your own brother stole your identity and your parents asked you to protect him instead of yourself? Would you forgive him without conditions, or would you create boundaries strong enough to save the life you work to build? Share your perspective in the comments, especially if someone has ever pressured you to remain silent in the name of family.